Okay, this is the 6th video for the Module 6 lecture material. We were just talking about how high self-esteem has its downside, right? That, like, violent criminals have high self-esteem, school bullies have high self-esteem. So high self-esteem is related to happiness, but it's not necessarily a good indicator of success in social relationships or in other areas of life. It's only weakly related to objective life outcomes. Okay, so let's turn now to narcissists and something called the dark triad. It's kind of more on the dark side of high self-esteem. So inflated self-esteem is associated with narcissism, which is a kind of personality that involves being very self-centered, a grandiose sense of self, which means feeling very important, feelings of entitlement, where sort of they're expected to be treated in a special way, manipulativeness, right? So narcissists tend to think they're very special, and they tend to think that other people should think so too and treat them special, right? So not surprisingly, narcissists have poor relationships with other people. It's hard to be friends with a narcissist. It's hard to be in a romantic relationship with a narcissist. It's hard to work for one. It's hard to have one as an employee. So they have poor relationships with others. They get angry when they're challenged, right? So narcissists will often push back when there's a threat to their sense of specialness, right? They tend to be unfaithful in relationships because they feel like the rules don't apply to them, right? So an analysis of many studies found increasing narcissism among American college students between 1979 and 2006. People scoring higher on narcissism than they used to. And the researchers pointed to these factors as potential contributors to this trend. First up is programs aimed at increasing self-esteem among young children. You know, this whole idea that everyone's a winner, everyone gets a gold star, everyone wins the prize. It has the best of intentions, right? Grown-ups are trying to make kids feel good about themselves, trying to enhance their self-esteem, but it's providing a false message, right, that everyone is entitled and everyone's a winner and all of that stuff, right? It also, by the way, deprives people of what it really feels like to succeed. If everyone's a winner, then you know, the actual winners don't really feel special. But if you have a more realistic scenario, then there is pleasure in overcoming those obstacles and in succeeding, right? And that's been deprived of kids, where everybody gets the gold star. Grade inflation. There's been a big issue with grade inflation over the years. This is where, you know, the average grades are going up and up and up. And that makes students feel that they're more capable than they are, right? So we're looking at 50 years of the rise of the A grade. This is percent of students getting an A in a class, right? And we see starting in, well, this goes all the way back to 63 up to 2013. Right? And this is called the student as consumer era, where people are kind of adopting this view of education, which says, as a student, you buy your education, you purchase a service, right? And therefore, you're entitled to be satisfied with the outcome as the consumer. It's probably the wrong model for education, right? No one's guaranteed an A. Okay, so by 2013, we're looking at almost half of people in a class getting an A, which is just giving incorrect information to people, right? And self-promotion websites like Instagram and TikTok and LinkedIn, where people are doing the whole selfie thing all the time and strategically self-presenting as fancy and fabulous, right? Everyone can feel like a celebrity. So these factors can contribute to narcissism. Some narcissists also have other negative traits beyond inflated self-esteem. The personality psychologist describes 3 negative personality traits that make up a dark triad. It's narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism. Each of these is associated with tendencies towards self-promotion, emotional coldness, dishonesty, and aggression. Dark triad. So let's look at these other components. We've talked about narcissism, but let's talk about psychopathy and Machiavellianism. So psychopathy involves a general lack of caring for the welfare of others, as well as poor impulse control and recklessness, right? This is the psychopath, okay? They don't care about how other people feel. They're just all about maximizing what they can get out of a situation. And that means using people, manipulating others for personal gain, right? Poor impulse control, which is all about if I want something, I want it now, right? And I don't care who I hurt. And that's also, of course, recklessness stepping in there too, where they can be destructive and not really care who they're hurting. And then Machiavellianism is named for the Italian philosopher Machiavelli, who back in the 1500s kind of cynically encouraged immoral behaviors like lying and cheating as effective tools in politics. So Machiavellianism refers to the tendency to manipulate others for one's own gain. The idea that the ends justify the means, right? That lying is okay, that cheating is okay, as long as it gets you where you want to go, right? So high Machiavellianism, the idea is it's better to be feared than loved, the ends justify the means. Someone who is low in Machiavellianism would value loyalty and relationships, right? Would value other people's opinions and other people's well-being. Okay? So some people's level of narcissism and or psychopathy are so high that they're diagnosable with a personality disorder, which we will visit again in chapter 14. But here's the diagnostic criteria for narcissistic personality disorder, right? So a pattern of grandiosity, need for admiration, lack of empathy, beginning young, and present across a bunch of contexts, as indicated by 5 or more of these. Sense of self-importance, preoccupied with fantasies of success, power, brilliance, etc., believing that they're special and unique, requiring excessive admiration, sense of entitlement, interpersonal exploitativeness, right? So they're taking advantage of others, lacking in empathy, envious of others or believing that others are envious of them, and showing arrogant, haughty behaviors or attitudes. Okay. Did I start my timer? No, of course I didn't. Let me do that now. Okay. So most of us feel pretty good about ourselves. Most of us have high self-esteem, and people show favoritism to anything associated with themselves. For example, people prefer their initials to other letters. There's my initials, right? There's a whole industry out there of initializing stuff, and people will buy stuff with their initials. So most of us feel pretty good about ourselves. In fact, most of us feel like we're better than average. It's called the better than average effect, which is statistically impossible, right? We can't all be better than average. Average is where most of us score. So consider these findings. 90% of people claim they're better than average drivers, which is statistically impossible. In a sample of 800,000 college-bound seniors, not one rated themselves as below average, when in fact something like 50% would be below average. A whopping 25% rated themselves in the top 1%. Okay, so people are way overestimating their standing compared to other folks, right? The normal distribution would tell us most people are average. That's why the bump is in the middle, right? And yet people are saying that they're in the top 1%. 1 in 4 people think they're way up here, which is absolutely impossible. So we have a bunch of unconscious strategies we use to help us maintain a positive sense of self. We're going to look at a couple here: positive illusions and social comparison. So we have positive illusions, which are overtly favorable, likely unrealistic beliefs about ourselves that manifest in at least 3 areas. Excuse me. First, we experience the better than average effect, right? Probably most of us think we're better than the average person on various things, which is positive illusion. Second, we falsely believe we have more control over outcomes than we have, right? So, for example, wearing the team jersey and thinking that will somehow help the team win, right? So all this Buffalo Bills stuff going on right now, as if you wearing the jersey or painting your face or whatever is going to affect the team. That's giving you a lot of control over things. Number three, we are unrealistically optimistic about our personal futures, right? So especially as young adults, teenagers and kids, people will often think that they're going to be famous and they're going to be rich, which most of the time doesn't happen, right? But these three kind of positive illusions help us to maintain this sense of high self-esteem. Social comparisons will also affect how we think about ourselves. So we evaluate our abilities and beliefs by comparing them with those of others. One form of comparison is called an upward social comparison. So sometimes we compare ourselves with people who seem superior to us in some way. People with low self-esteem are more likely to do this. So it's probably not good for our self-esteem to keep looking to others who seem to have it all, to be cooler, richer, more handsome, all of that stuff. Probably bad for our self-esteem, right? Looking at the TikTokers who are gazillionaires at the age of 16, stuff like that. That's an upward comparison. The downward comparison is when we compare ourselves to people who seem inferior or to be doing less well than us. And people with high self-esteem tend to do this more. So it probably contributes to feeling good about yourself to see other people, having more problems, which is why these shows like Maury and all that are popular, because they trot out people whose lives are train wrecks. And you can look at that and say, well, at least that's not me. It's a downward comparison. Okay? Another form of downward comparison is called temporal comparison. This refers to time. So this is when we view our current self as better than our past self. And this can be good for self-esteem, right? So you look at where you are now and you look at where you were then and you see your progress, right? I'm not perfect yet, but I'm better than I was. I see progress. That contributes to self-esteem. There's also the self-serving bias, which supports a positive sense of self, right? And we've talked about this before. People with high self-esteem tend to take credit for their successes, but they blame failure on outside factors, right? So this is called the self-serving bias. So for example, when we do well on a test, we see that as a sign that we're smart and capable and we've done hard work. But then when we fail a test, we attribute that to the test being unfair or something like that, right? So we claim our successes as evidence that we're awesome, and we fail to claim our failures as evidence that maybe we're not awesome. That's a self-serving bias, and it makes us feel better about ourselves. Sense of self is also influenced by cultural factors. So in Western cultures, like the one that we're in, people often take pride in standing out from the crowd, being different, being unique, right? But in some cultures, people prefer to blend in. And whether people see themselves as fundamentally separate from or connected to other people affects the sense of self, and culture plays a big part here. So we can talk about collectivist versus individualist cultures, which emphasize different senses of self, right? So when we were talking about in-group and out-group, we're talking about kind of cultural factors here. So we can describe cultures as individualist or as collectivist. An individualistic culture is one in which the members' primary focus is that of themselves and their immediate families. The United States is like the poster child of individualist cultures, right? You're told from the minute you're born that your destiny is yours to determine, that it's all about individually perfected happiness. You get to pursue your own version of happy, whatever that is, right? And collectivist cultures, this is where members are concerned more with the well-being of the group than their own well-being. They're told from day one that, the group is more important than the individual. So collectivist cultures emphasize connections to family, social and ethnic groups, conforming to the social norms, being cohesive as a group. And so sense of self is being strongly influenced by social roles and relationships. Now, this obviously happens to everybody, but it's the more predominant kind of factors in a collectivist culture. Whereas in an individualist culture, the emphasis is on rights and freedoms, self-expression, diversity. Okay, so a big part of it is going to be like, what culture were you raised with? Right? Okay, I'm going to pause here, and we will pick it up with the next one in the next one.